Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We can go ahead and get started with the work session if y'all are ready.
Sounds good. Thank you, Josh.
So first up, we'll go through some quick elections. It's that time of year. And then I'll run through the agenda. So we do need to have nominations and elections for chairperson and co-chairperson. So
right.
I'll let you take it away.
Sounds good. I will now open it up for nominations for chairman of the Design Review Commission.
I nominate James Marsh.
So
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, Christine, you please call the roll.
Rudine.
Aye.
Marsh.
Aye.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Zuckerman.
Aye.
Erstad.
No.
Bull.
Aye.
5 in favor, 1 opposed. Motion carries.
All right. Next, we're going to move on to co-chair. So I'd open up to the commission for a nomination for co-chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just, is it appropriate to ask if there's anybody
Oh,
who
additional?
who would like to be co-chair aside from,
Sure, we can.
Mr. Rudine?
You want to discuss? Yeah, sure.
And I would throw out that I would give it up gladly to put somebody new to do it. So if somebody does want to do it, I'm way okay with that.
so I thought we should have done that the first time and didn't. So.
Mr.
yeah,
Chair,
Yes.
if
Sure.
Commissioner Rudine is looking to offload that title, I would not dodge it.
Okay, great. With that, would somebody like to make a motion for nominations for co-chair?
Good.
Yeah, he wants to do it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Ryan Erstad for co-chair of Design Review.
Okay, so moved,
Second,
seconded. Are there any other nominations? None. Any discussion? Mr. Erstad already indicated he's interested in performing the duties.
Well, I didn't say I was interested. I said I wouldn't avoid it.
Mr.
Well, he
Chair,
said he wouldn't avoid it. So with that, Christine, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew I was here
Oh, there
online.
you are. Sorry, Ben.
No, you're good.
Anything other comments, Ben, from your side?
Nope.
Okay,
Simple.
Yes.
Rudine.
Aye.
Marsh.
aye.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Zuckerman.
aye.
Erstad.
Sure.
Bull.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All
Great.
right, sounds good.
Want to run through the agenda real quick, Josh?
Yeah, and I digress. I should have introduced our new commissioner first. I'm sorry, Patrick. Should have done that before elections. But some of you may know Patrick Bull from professional work experience here in Boise as part of the Roundhouse development team. We are thrilled to welcome him to the commission for a term. And thank you, Patrick, and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Welcome.
So for the agenda tonight, a pretty short agenda and will be made shorter by a couple of deferrals. We are proposing item number 1, and that's DRH 23-00384 on Freight Street for the consent agenda.
Okay.
Unless anyone has any concerns, wants to hear that one, speak up. Number 2 is a late deferral. They have requested to be deferred to the February 14th, 2024 hearing.
Okay.
We will plan on briefly hearing number 3 since it's a downtown project and we have had a practice of giving those a hearing and a presentation. And then we will, number 4 is also a deferral. And again, that's to the February 14th, 2024 meeting.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions for staff from the commission?
Okay,
Hearing
all right. We'll get started here in about 9 minutes.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the January 10th, 2024 Design Review Commission meeting to order. And with that, Christina, will you please call the roll?
Temple,
Here,
Rudine,
Here.
Marsh,
Here.
Aguilar,
Here.
Zuckerman,
Here.
Ersted,
Here?
Bull,
Here.
all present.
All right, we got a couple of minutes to approve. So at this time, I'd look to get a motion on the December 13th work session and design review committee meeting minutes, again, from December 13th, 2023.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I move to approve the minutes from the work session and the design review commission meeting of December 13th, 2023.
great. So
Second.
moved.
Second.
And seconded, who seconded that first? We'll give it to Pat, was that you?
I think I took it, yeah.
You think it's, okay. Did you get that?
Mr. Chair,
Right. Yes.
I'm going to recuse myself as I was not in attendance at the December hearing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Simple.
Mr. Chair, I'll do
Yes.
the same.
Thank you.
I was there. I was not there also. I'll recuse myself.
Thank you, Ms. Rudine. Any others? Discussion on the motion? None. Christina, you call the roll on the minutes? Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Ersted, were you recused?
No, I
Okay.
was there for that.
Okay,
And I'm
Ersted.
voting aye.
All
right.
in favor, motion carries.
Thank you, Christine. We have a couple items up for deferral tonight, two items. First item for deferral is going to be item number 2. It's DRH 23-00388. Location is 6848 West State Streets for the construction of a new field canopy and to renovate the existing building for use as a convenience store on a property in a C2D zone. Is there, this will be deferred to the February 14th, 2024 meeting. Is there any member of the public or the audience wishing to speak to this item who cannot make the February 14th date? Seeing none in person, any online, Josh? Seeing none, this item will get placed on our deferral for our motions. The second item, well, actually, let's just do a motion on the first item for deferral.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I move that DRH 23-00388 be deferred to the 2/14/24 meeting.
great. Thank you, Mr. Rudine. So moved.
Second?
And seconded. Thank you, Ms. Zuckerman. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Christina, you please call the roll?
Simple,
Aye.
Rudine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Ersted,
Aye.
Bull,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Second item is up for deferral is item number 4. Its location is 6614 West Street. It's for the construction of a new car wash building and associated site improvements on a C2D zone. Again, that's DRH 23-00391 at 6614 West State. Is there anyone in the or any members of the audience wishing to speak to this item who cannot make the deferred date of February 14th, 2024? Seeing none in the audience. Josh, any online? None online. Any discussion on, actually, I'd take a motion for this item for deferral.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I move that DRH 23-00391 be deferred to the 2/14/24 meeting.
Thank you. So moved.
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Zuckerman. So moved. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Simple,
Aye.
Rudine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Ersted,
Aye.
Bull,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. We have one item that we're considering for the consent agenda tonight. That is item number 1. It's DRH 23-00384. The location is 2500 East Freight Street. It's for the construction of a new approximately 70,227 square foot warehouse building and associated site improvements on a property in an M2D zone. Is the applicant present tonight? He's online. Okay.
I'm here
And-
online.
Yeah, thank you. And are you in agreement with recommended conditions of approval?
I am, yes.
Please, record show they are in agreement. Is there any member of the public wishing to testify in opposition to this item tonight, either in person or online? Seeing none in person, any online, Josh? No, great. Seeing none, this item will be moved to the consent agenda. And that's our only item for the consent agenda tonight. So I would be open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Reading.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, so moved. And second, thank you, Ms. Zuckerman. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Christina, you please call the roll?
Simple,
I,
Rudine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Bull,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. Excuse me, now we're gonna move on to our items for a regular part of our hearing. First one to be heard tonight is gonna be item number 3, which is DRH 23-00370. Project locations 1111 West State Street. And with this, I will turn it over to Catherine for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Before my presentation, I would like to invite our planning director, Tim King, to speak a few words about this project.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for a minute, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Just once again, and every time, I want to thank you for the service you provided the residents of Boise. Sorry, I'm not crying. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, the incredible public service that you provide by serving on this commission. Architecture is so important in the city. It's only going to get more important as the city gets denser and we implement our new zoning code, for instance. So thank you for this unique service that you provide. I wanted to speak very briefly on this just because, as was the case with an item that I spoke to you about recently, we had been submitted this proposal by the developer and their architects, and we had some concerns that they jumped into with us and addressed. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. Always appreciate it when we get a development team and their designer that's open to discussions, you know, as they're coming forward to DRC and seeking to make something better that you all can review. And specifically, I'll mention about this, that we had some discussion about this building. It's an important building, obviously, on State Street. And yet it's also what you might call kind of a fabric building in the city that you know, will be important in terms of, as State Street redevelops, what it says about our expectations for State Street as it gets denser and we have taller buildings there. As a fabric building, we felt strongly that it was important that it be as simple as it could be. It's not trying to draw too much attention to itself. It's trying to just be part of that fabric of the city. And we liked where they ended up. The things that we had discussed with the nice, we think, addition of the mural that would be in that second story courtyard space facing State Street, the things that we were concerned about when we initially had the submittal were, number one, the street level treatment on State Street. And let's acknowledge that State Street does present some challenges in terms of getting more urban, given the nature of that street. And it's tight at times. It will always carry a significant amount of traffic, more so as the city grows. So there's this issue of having a urban, you know, building on that street presents some challenges that you wouldn't have necessarily on other streets in the city. And we really talked through that with them and felt that their ultimate proposal was seeking to provide as much room as you could to pedestrians there. And some of the design at that ground level was specifically to do that, to try to provide as much room and kind of comfort on the sidewalk as you possibly can to pedestrians. Also, the work they did around the kind of accentuation of the entries to the building at the corner of 11th and State, 12th and State, and then also the mid-block address that would be a residential address, you know, liked the way they worked on that and really tried to accentuate it. The additional space they provided at 11th and State for the cafe space that would be there. Nice addition. So in the midst of a street that's a busier one that will get busier, trying to provide as much comfort space for pedestrians and then trying to create opportunities for some kind of activation along the street we thought was really nice. The last thing I'll mention is that we initially had some concerns about the color of the building, that the original proposal we felt like would kind of draw too much attention to it, and ask them to consider some alternatives that would be more natural tones and kind of just let it, be less in your face a little bit. And they came to the colors that you now have before you tonight, and we thought it was a vast improvement. So Catherine's going to go through the recommendations from us, but I did want to acknowledge their willingness, and we'll always do that in cases where we've got developer applicants doing what we're asking, which is getting denser in the city, but also willing to consider design changes to address those issues we feel like are most important. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions for him real quick from the commission? Appreciate your input on that too.
Yeah.
Thanks, team. This project is bordered by State Street to the north and 11th Street to the east, and 12th Street to the west, and with an alleyway running along the south. This project is also known as Block 69 North, and it is the last piece of the larger YMCA development blocks. The recent approved other YMCA projects include the new YMCA at the Block 68 South project. They are located just one block east of 11th Street. Currently, there are 2 existing buildings and some surface parking on site, which will all be demoed to prepare the space for the proposed development. The project site development is composed of 2 street typologies. The downtown Boise urban concrete street typology will be installed along the street frontages and using the typical site furnishings approved tree species. These improvements will tie into the proposed CCDC improvements on 11th Street. For the exterior areas between the building facade at the right-of-way, the site will be developed to provide pedestrian-friendly features, which I will touch on in detail shortly. All vehicular access will be provided through the alley. This property is in P2 parking overlay and qualifies for 30% parking reduction. With a reduction, the required parking is 143 spaces. The project site will accommodate 40 tucked under surface parking. The other required parking will be provided by the approved parking garage of Block 68 South. The applicant, therefore, is required to provide a shared parking agreement prior to building permit. The ground floor will be developed to provide pedestrian circulation in a small gathering space to support adjacent building uses. Elevation changes, planters, and planting materials are used to improve spatial separation and create distinctive entry nodes for the following 3 different uses. The retail use, which is located at the corner of 11th and State Street, and the leasing office and a residential lobby in the mid block, and the bike entrance at the corner of 12th and State Street. Here are the renderings of the entry nodes. As you can see, wood textured wall and soffit claddings are used to help define a warm and inviting pedestrian scale. Large expanses of storefront curtain wall also help to activate the street frontage and creates a sense of nightness to the upper mass. And the columns will provide scale and rhythm along each facade, while the glazed color tiles marks the points of entry along the building. The second floor features 2 large courtyards with residential units. These courtyards are carved out of the building mass. Each reveals a vibrant inner expression with color murals and extensive green spaces, which will add interest to the vertical building mass. The courtyard along State Street, which is the one you're seeing right now, will be an active space with lounge and outdoor seating, co-working spaces, and an opening to watch the passing activities on the street. Third to sixth floor will provide more residential units, and the top floor will add 2 more amenity space, and also, of course, the residential units as well. The overall scale and the color of the building is consistent with other buildings downtown and with anticipated future developments in this area. The upper volume of the building is clean and quiet with a simple dark brown metal scheme. The use of 3 vertical fluted panel profiles in the same color and tone helps to further break down the scale of upper mass. And a strong but simple pattern language is utilized with the oversized window, with some having extended shadow box frame to add subtle details to the architectural language. The roof line of the building angles up along both 11th Street and State Street, with a crescendo being at the active corner across from the new YMCA. The planning team finds the development creates a distinctive building appearance as encouraged by the downtown design review standards and guidelines and compliance with requirements by the Legacy Zoning Code. With that, the planning team recommends approval of DRH 23-00370 with included condition of approval in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions for staff at the moment from the commission?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Could we go back to the site plan, please?
Sure.
It doesn't show very well on here, but there's a hidden line call out of building overhang. And I just want to clarify, where is the property boundary? And where does that overhang relate to the property boundary?
I believe the property boundary is at a ground floor where you see a line of planter.
Okay. And that overhang projects 8 feet, 9 feet beyond that?
I believe that is correct. I'm
sorry,
sure
Catherine,
the applicant can speak to that. 6 feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. This time I invite the applicant forward to present, making comments. And if you would, please state your name and address for the record. Yeah, I don't think your microphone's on. Is it? Nope.
All right, I'm a tech.
There we go.
So thanks again, Catherine and Tim, for your comments and recommendations. And thank you all for braving the storm to listen to my presentation, which Catherine pretty much stole all my thunder. So
If I could just get you to start with your
yes,
name and address.
yes, Michael McHugh. Address is South 116 6th Street. That's where our firm is. My address is 3915 Pasadena Drive, Boise. So yeah, I'm pleased and happy to present the 69 North project tonight. Notes so I can go through this. So let's get started. As Catherine mentioned, the project is on the north half of Block 69, bordered by 11th and 12th Streets, just south of State, and will be just to the west of the future Y, as well as Block 68 South. The context surrounding it is primarily 1, 2, and 3-story commercial buildings, some residential, parking garages, obviously the Boise Cascade building, 11th and Idaho, and Jerry Buckner Webb Park as well are some of the outstanding buildings out there. Moving along. This is just kind of the ground floor. It's C5DD, the block frontages designations of commercial mixed use and landscape. And you can see by the form of the ground floor that we have active retail, residential amenities, and residential units that surround and conceal parking services as well as utilities located off the alley. And you can see the arrow also, as Catherine mentioned, the access to the 40 parking spaces and the remainder of the parking being in 68 South. The dashed line in this, and to your point, Erstad, you can see it in red, is that overhang that is primarily on the, is only on the State Street side. Everywhere else, currently we have it buffered about a foot from the property line. But as you can see, the ground floor is primarily set back from the property line to kind of give breadth, and especially where we have units along 12th and 11th Street to give a bit of breadth and buffer from the sidewalk and street. Similar to 68 South, we are shooting for LEED for Home Gold certification, and our team is currently working with our sustainability consultant to reach this goal. Solar-ready pedestrian connectivity, bike facilities, EV parking station infrastructure, and 100% residential electrification are some of the strategies we are pursuing. It is a 7-story mixed-use building, 5/2. We currently have 222 multifamily units and a combined amount, about 16,000 square feet of amenities if you include the terraces and courtyards on the 2nd level, as well as the 7th floor as well. And this definitely helps with prioritizing a connection to nature and the outdoors. We also, as mentioned, have that predominant corner at 11th and State, the about 3,200 square feet of retail. And also have the about 230 bike parking spaces that are both inside the amenity space at the ground floor as well as off the parking area that would be secured and covered. The most prominent corner of the project is most certainly 11th and State, which at the ground floor is anchored by the retail commercial space, as you can see in orange, with multiple entries. And then the active residential amenities continue down State Street towards 12th Street, and the main residential entry being mid-block along State. The ground floor residential amenity will consist of like resident coffee bar lounge incorporating a biophilic design to further connect the residents to the outdoors, a bike room with bike wash, as well as bike tune and tenant workshop space, which is essentially towards the 12th Street corner entry there, as well as dog wash. 7 residential loft-like units are set back and up slightly along both 12th and 11th Street, as you can see in the blue. There and there. So we have 4 on 12th Street and 3 on 11th. And with that, are providing enough space for a landscape planter buffer and a small patio space for each one of those units. Additionally, there's a large secured covered bike storage, and you can kind of see it back in the left-hand corner, or west corner. So with that, and Catherine described this very well, but the ground level provides an active, warm, and inviting space for both building occupants and passersby. I'm hoping these next slides, which you have seen most of these images, but hopefully larger will show a little more detail. The partial elevation you can see adds a coherency and rhythm along the facade on State Street. Structural columns, wood tone cladding, and refined entry detailing all contribute to that active ground floor storefront street space. At the 12th Street corner, we provide a deep setback, entry clad in colorful tile with space for pedestrian interaction, thoughtful landscaping, as well as potential public art. The resident you can kind of see off to the right. Oh, darn it. Oh, man. Whoops. Which way am I going here? Wrong way. Okay. Now that you've seen the whole presentation. So you can see off to the right here, this is essentially what the residential loft units look like, step back, still having kind of that covered porch with the wood soffit. At mid-block along State is the main resident entry, which is recessed and accented with colorful wall and soffit cladding, similar to the other entries along the primary street frontage. Setback allows for seating, tables, and small planters to help soften the building base and provides a spot for residents and community to interact. There's large expanses of storefront and wood tone soffit, which draws your attention into the active amenity space within. This is kind of a before and after, and Tim touched on it in terms of us working with the city to address additional concerns on that corner. I mean, originally you can see to the left, the before was essentially just highlighting the entry itself. And then we felt it was probably best to turn that active space or cafe seating, if you will, toward to kind of play off what the plaza across the street with the future Y, as opposed to facing it towards State Street. We felt that would be a softer, more appropriate use of the space. Let's see, so next. And then this is just, I think, an additional image kind of showing that view down State Street looking east. Really highlights that overhang of the building volume above and kind of all the pieces that are elements that are working together to create that active ground floor presence. The columns, you can see that the steel wall element where we have landscaping as well as seating integrated, the building facade pushed back to give again that more breadth to that streetscape. So it doesn't feel so tight and pushed up necessarily against the curb line. And like I said, this image also shows that upper overhang and how that helps to create that kind of inviting space for the pedestrian. As we move to the upper levels of the building, the expression of form is deliberately simple yet refined, with the primary design move being the erosion of the building volume, creating two large courtyard amenity spaces at the second level. Two carved out courtyards will be active green spaces with terrace seating and large planters for tree-sized landscaping. These spaces provide both the residential units as well as common areas, an abundance of natural light, and a greater connection to the outdoor environment. And I feel like this is something that isn't seen in this typology often, is kind of your interior corridors having good access to views and light. And so we feel this really accomplishes that within those courtyards. And you can see that roughly kind of these areas being these spots being the corridor that are exposed to courtyards. One of the main and exciting attributes of the courtyards will be the colorful, to be determined murals that will surround the space, providing interest and contrast to the simple expression of the outer building facade. And that is represented as another option. This is different than the one that's in most of the renderings, but again, just to note that it's still to be determined, but adds that active and vibrant space. This is the upper level. This shows level 7, the amenity of game room and roof terrace. That'll have extraordinary views to the Boise foothills. And I skipped showing 3 through 6 just because it's essentially this where you would just have units in the corner where those amenity spaces are. But again, just highlighting that all these corridors, midline, really have views out either towards the city or towards the foothills, as well as the green courtyards below. So our art, and this is our materials and systems board. Our goal with the design was to work with a limited material palette and embrace a simplicity that would create an enduring, visually pleasing structure that contributes to the fabric of the city, similar to what Tim mentioned earlier. So primarily we have 4 building materials. We're using a concealed fastener metal panel with 3 different profiles, all within the same color, but just allow a subtle nuance as you move up the building. And then an EIFS stucco, and do have a sample of the metal skin, at least one of the profiles. This is what's on the upper floors. And this is the color. And we also have EIFS stucco. I didn't bring a sample of that. I figure everyone knows what that looks like. But we are trying to do probably a smooth sand finish, one that would be, applicable for murals to be painted on it, as kind of a canvas for that backdrop. In the upper right corner, you can kind of see at least a precedent for what Catherine mentioned about some of the windows on the main facade that would have kind of an extended frame detail to the windows. And then wood tone cladding, which is, we're suggesting our basis of design is a Resista panel. If anyone has seen it, I do have a sample if someone wants to see and feel it. It is very, it works like wood, but it is actually using 60% agriculture waste, rice husks, and a polymer to make this panel. And it does have a nice texture to it. It doesn't feel flat in terms of, so it's very tactile. And it comes in a number of colors, so we're still working on that, but it would be of wood tone primarily. Also, on the bottom left, you can see the intent of kind of the highlight of those entries at the ground floor with that glazed tile. As well as, I didn't bring a sample of storefront because I'm pretty sure everyone knows what that looks like as well, but that would be primarily at the ground floor, and we do currently have it at the second floor amenity space that opens out onto the State Street side courtyard. And again, kind of a before and after, as Tim mentioned, we kind of worked with the city, and this was our original design that we wanted to be light and bright and striking. The city reached out and obviously had concerns with that. And so we worked and thought it was contrasting to the neighborhood. So we worked with them to develop, we took the comments and developed a color palette of warmer tones that was more in connection with the surrounding context, but still bold, we thought, and thought that was important. This view just shows upper volume and how it rests above the ground floor active facade with the cutout in the skin to reveal the inviting and colorful courtyard within. Further detail, Catherine showed this one earlier. View highlighting the ground floor activity and a view into that courtyard, that pop of color that just kind of sparks interest and makes you want to investigate or learn more about it. And then last slide, the view shows location and how we change the profile of the building. And it kind of has like a crescendo, if you will, similar to the roof line, which we are kind of raising up towards the 11th and State Street corner, again, to kind of add interest and change the volume subtly of the upper mass. And with that, take any questions. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicants?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Syke.
I have a couple questions, comments. First is regarding the mural. I love that concept of putting the mural in there, and I like all the concepts you've shown in the different images. I guess my question is maybe to staff and the applicant is, I understand it's not yet determined the final design. And I guess, will this commission have an opportunity to see the proposed mural down the road. It's just, I love the color palettes that you've expressed here. And I guess I just want to make sure that, that the integrity of that remains. And unfortunately, if it shifts, say, the other direction, it's like, oh, it's like this two-tone pattern and it's beige and white. Because I think that could be really amazing. And I just want to make sure that happens.
Yeah, the light. of that.
So maybe I'll wait for Catherine to maybe respond to that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, typically we will receive mural as a separate, excuse me, as a separate application, and it's going to be a two phases application. We will review the locations and how it fixed on the wall, and then arts and history will review the content and register the mural. So typically, design review team will not review the content of the mural.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, Commissioner Aguilar. I just think that in a situation where something like 40% of the facade is intended to be mural, that seems like it would fall a little bit more closely under our purview. And, you know, this is a pretty integral part of the overall material palette.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I think your point, Commissioner Erstad, is well taken, that this is somewhat more of a paint scheme than a mural. I mean, murals are typically very small targeted areas that there is a very public involvement process. And as Catherine mentioned, it goes through arts and history, and we don't review the content. If we were to look at this as a quote unquote paint scheme that was integral to the building design, I think we could put some parameters around certainly colors and keeping it somewhat harmonious with what they've submitted. It would be a little unusual to bring that back to you at work session for a final approval of that design, but I think we could, if we frame it, I think very specifically in that way, that this is not a mural. It's a paint scheme on the building.
Mr. Chair, and I don't know if this would be too strange of a mechanism to implement, but you know, to the one side, there is this idea that there's an artistic component to this, and we wouldn't want to interject ourselves into that process. But to the other, you know, we do need to maintain standards and make sure that we're not getting less than promised. Could we place a parameter saying it obviously needs to cover the entirety of this facade, and it needs to hit X number of colors across whatever spectrum? Or is that trying to create something that has no right existing?
No, I think Commissioner Erstad, we could certainly, I think, place a condition on this approval that mural, like you said, covers the entire alcove as shown in the drawings. And then, you know, maybe some language around is largely similar, you know, it's very similar to the submitted drawings in terms of color and color blocking and
Vibrancy.
design. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Erstad. My second question, it's really more of a comment with regards to the courtyard and the landscaping there. I know you probably have an amazing landscape architect involved with that, and it's my understanding just through secondhand that some of the, in particular, student housing projects that we have that have a similar design in terms of a courtyard with 3 or 4 walls around them. And I'm hearing that the landscaping that was installed is having difficulties because it's just not getting enough sun. And so I guess I would just caution you and just make sure your landscape architect just takes that in consideration, and it looks awesome and the plants can thrive there in whatever natural light that they're getting. So thank you. That's all my comments.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bolt.
Michael, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
I actually think it looks great. I think Pivot North and DeChase have done some really nice work in downtown Boise. And I appreciate the design here. Just a couple questions. When it comes to the metal profile and you're changing that as it goes up the building. Can you explain kind of the difference in the metal profiles?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to read in the rendering, and trying to do that amount of corrugation on a model is also can become cumbersome. But the intent is that from the 3 levels, and maybe I'll just back up this. So profile 1, I would say, is, let's say you have a positive and negative. Let's say the negative is the recess, the positive is what's sticking proud. So that lower one, the negative, would be wider, and then it increasingly gets more dense as you go up the building. So that is the idea, is that you have a wider gap at the first level, that gap gets a little smaller at the second level, and then it gets even tighter at the third level. So you kind of have this, texture kind of movement up the facade.
Got it. So the profile you have here, is that on the building?
Yes, this is the top, the
That's the
top
top.
3 floor. So
Okay.
that's up here. This upper floor
Got it.
is this. Yep.
Thank you for that. Another question, in the renderings, it looked like on the windows, there was like a white lockout. Can you
Yes.
explain that?
Yeah, I can explain that. Yeah, again, it doesn't read as well in those. So what looks like a white blockout in these areas is actually the mechanical system integrated within the window system. So that would be a louvered screen, essentially. Louvered.
I see.
Yep.
Is that like a PTAC unit?
Essentially, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see a roof plan in there. Is there any equipment, roof mounted equipment proposed?
Probably nothing major. There may be something for the restaurant space, and we are making the building PV ready. So whatever equipment potentially goes up on that as well. And we are still working through the mechanical systems and how we're venting and certain things like that and how we will be dealing with it. So, but anything that we would have up there would be screened by the parapets, is our intent.
Yeah, I guess same would go for like exhaust fans, especially on metal buildings. There's some examples in downtown Boise's where they started in one place and they kind of move floor to floor
Yep,
and they're not
yep,
aligned.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, I didn't know if you guys had any ideas or if you're exhausting out through the face of the building or if you're doing a common roof.
We
exhaust.
are still working through that a little bit, but I can tell you that we have been working pretty rigorously on the layout of the building so that if we do have them out the face, they will be aligned and symmetrical and not all over the place.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Dunn.
could we get a closer look at the second floor plan of this?
I don't know that I have a close-up of it besides that in my presentation.
Right.
I don't know if that's enough to,
So you have a 2-story concrete podium.
2 stories concrete podium. Yep.
So the columns on the first floor, they go up through
They go up
the
through.
second
Yep.
floor.
Yep.
Okay, so when I was looking at this packet, it was not a miss when there were columns kind of in the middle of some of those unit plans.
You can see.
There, we've worked quite, there are a few units that have some challenging column locations. But we've really been working hard to mitigate most of those, and feel that we have them either in the party walls or located within the corridors. So that's at the second level, we do have kind of expanded corridors to allow for some of that, those spaces. Yep.
And can you remind me again on the residential levels, what window system you're using for those?
It's a vinyl.
It's a vinyl window.
system. Yep.
okay. And then on the ground floors, is that actually a clear C type one with a back gasketed front? So it looks like a single, I think that's what your example on your materials is.
That's what I was showing on the materials, and we're still working through curtain wall versus storefront.
Okay.
But it will be assisted because we do have that overhang because of ACHE requirement, because we're going over the right of way. Obviously, we have to be a minimum of 17 feet up. So our ground floor is quite expansive. So we do have kind of, elevated window. And I'm sure most people know that storefront after around 10, 12 feet, you kind of want to move up. So we're working through the structural requirements for the storefront as well as curtain wall and how that would play out.
One more quick question on the windows. What was the color on the vinyl on the exterior?
We're also working on that. In the original design, it was white on white. We really are hoping to go with, given that we have kind of the dark bronze, it's an Adobe. I don't know if anyone's seen the building out on, or is it Orchard and I can't remember. It's near the Fred Meyer. Anyway, I think G.G.L. Franklin. There you go. Yep. It's got a black stucco and I think they're using kind of an almond color. And I think the relationship works fairly well with that. So that would be what we were shooting for, but that is still in process as well to understand financing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
I think the renderings show this, but just to clarify, your example showing the extended frame window trim here as a full box, but I think it's just 3 sides.
No,
on the
it's
renders.
all 4.
That's the whole thing?
Yep. And that would be primarily, and maybe this one shows it best, but
Small windows.
it would be around the windows that are at the bedrooms. So all the bedrooms, which are the smaller, only 4 foot wide windows, would have that kind of extended frame. The larger windows would not.
What material is that on the frame?
That is a metal.
Okay.
Yep,
It's
as
just-
well, in the same color as the siding.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
sorry, Michael, one more on the windows. So is this like a screen underneath the window that'll carry the louver with the PTAC?
No, that is integrated within. So essentially think of it as, instead of glass, that would be part of the window system, and they just pop out the glass and it has a louvered system within it. And that PTAC is kind of behind that.
Got it. So it's
So
built into
It's
the window.
built into the window system, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much. Is there a member of the neighborhood association here tonight? See any in person, any online, Josh? No? Are there any members of the public wishing to testify to this here tonight? Seeing none in person. Josh, any online? Okay. Anything else from the applicant before we close? Bring it back to the commission? All right. With that, we'll close the public portion of the testimony and bring it back to the commission for discussion and a motion. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I have a few comments I'd like to share.
Sure.
First, I would like to thank the developer and the architects. I love the glazed tile on the street level. I feel like as a city, we don't pay enough attention to the street level often and put, well, what do I care? We put cheap material there. And I think that especially in a corridor where a lot of people are going to walk, hopefully, especially given the widened sidewalks, I think that the glazed tile is an investment that will pay off in spades. I love that this is part of a several building development so that the whole building doesn't have to be parking and that the parking load is shared with a building that will be obscured by the Y. So that, I hope that that set a precedent for other developments. I wrote down all these nice things to say that I want to make sure to say. Oh, yes, and I really like that the sidewalk on State Street is protected. This is not a design review issue, but it's more of a greater urban environment issue that I feel like it's all of our jobs to make people want to walk more, and especially around the YMCA. And this is, from the high school into the rest of downtown, and just having that one block with a covered sidewalk, I think could make a huge difference. So I really appreciate that. And then the other thing is the mural. I work with a lot of muralists who don't appreciate being given too much direction. And I think it's going to be difficult for us to, even if it's a paint scheme, to determine the paint scheme if we want it to be artistic and not just a color. And on one of the slides, it was the slide that we had up last. I'm pointing to Ben, but it's only because that's where the slides were for me. There was one that was blue and white, sort of a wave, and I thought that looked just as good. It was just blue and white, and they were all, I think it had the materials on it, that slide. But I thought it was just as effective as this rainbow.
Here's the example photo from a different project, right?
Yeah.
That they used on the
Oh,
material
okay.
sheet.
Well, I
Yes.
thought that was also really effective. And as some people who work for this city have said to me before, very wisely, art is hard. And whatever, yeah, it was that 2 slides ago. Like, no, you just passed it.
There you go.
That one in the middle. I think as long as we don't see a whole lot of just plain stucco, a treatment like that is also really interesting and will draw the eye and could be really cool. So hopefully whoever the muralist is does a really good job, and it's hard to sort of not want to control that, but I don't know how much we can control it. And then lastly, this really is a key spot in the city where people are going to see the building from up close and from a little bit away as they drive down State Street. And I like so much that it's not, well, I keep trying to be polite and then deciding it's not worthwhile, that it doesn't look like it's trying to create its own skyline like a lot of newer buildings try to do, and that the roof is almost flat, except it's not boring. So that the cutout on the corner does a really good job of making the building not look like an old warehouse. Not that there's anything wrong with an old warehouse, but it keeps it interesting without making it look suburban or like a chain hotel or other things that try to create their own skylines when they're really one building in the fabric of an entire city. So I'd like to commend you on that roof line, and again, hope that that's an example for other buildings to come. So if we, this is a huge win as far as street level treatment and rooftop treatment. And to me, that's huge because I think that's what we often get wrong. And that's all I have.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Simple.
Yeah, I kind of want to just a real couple quick comments, mostly just sort of touching on a couple things that the other commissioners have talked about. First, regarding the landscape design, I did review the plant choices pretty extensively on this one, and it does look like their landscape architect really took care in choosing plants that work well within the different light exposure zones. A lot of the stuff that's located on the north side is at least a partial shade plant that can, thrive within a partial shade environment. And then as you move around to the west side and the east sides of the buildings, they go with a plants that are more appropriate in a full sun environment. So I think that they've done a good job at, I always recommend they take a look, as they get closer to construction documents and see, really take a specific look at those spaces where they're right up against the building on the north side, to make sure that essentially full shade is going to not lead to something like a failure of the plants, as Commissioner Aguilar had touched on. But looking at it based on these plans, it looks like they did a pretty good job with the plant selection on that. And then regarding the mural, I kind of want to echo what Commissioner Zuckerman had said. I mean, I understand wanting to make sure that the color scheme is reflective of what we've just seen, because it is very impactful and very bright, and it's just a lot of interest there. But trying to direct the artist to go down a certain path with a certain color palette, it may handcuff what we get. and it might not be as good as what someone else comes up with if they have the opportunity. With the Arts and History Department of the city, I mean, they're reviewing these extensively. I'm sure they're looking at surrounding context and, you know, precedent stuff that's been approved previously. And so hopefully, you know, that's part of the package that the artists that are brought in to potentially bid on this or get the job would be looking at as sort of I guess just a driving image or inspirational images for them when they come down to the final design of that those murals. I do think that it sounds like this is probably a project, and based on some of the feedback from the applicant regarding, you know, they're looking at some stuff in terms of costs for different materials and some of the details that, you know, we're obviously going to want to see this back at a work session at you know, with 50% or something else like that, which is a pretty much standard across the board now for anything downtown that we're looking at. So I think we'll maybe, if they get a better idea of some artists, or if they, you know, have solicited that, maybe we can get an idea of a couple thoughts on those murals at that point again as well. And other than that, I think this is a great looking building. I love this area of town, and I work not too far away, and I walk around all the time down here, and I'm excited to see this along with the rest of the YMCA complex kind of come in, really change this spot. So thank you.
It was simple.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stead.
I think because it's been touched on a couple of times, and I might be putting words into Commissioner Aguilar's mouth, but what I was trying to get at with the mural comment was more that, you know, I'd like for us to have some direction, not necessarily from an artistic standpoint, but just the idea that the vibrancy of the mural that's shown adds a lot to this design. And you got to trust the artistic process, but if the artist is just so enamored with beige and slightly darker beige, then I think we lose a lot from this design. So, you know, again, without trying to put guardrails on this thing, I think it was important to note that a certain degree of this design success has to do with the vibrance of the colors and the contrast to the rest of the building and the kind of the neutrals and the natural colors. That said, I still don't think that it is necessarily our place to interject into the artistic process, but I think it's a note that should be amended to this whole thing to make sure that there is a certain degree of that contrast and those kind of interplays. I am going to be, as always, the negative member of this commission. I really don't think this is a good building. I think the fact that this projects out into one of the most claustrophobic stretches of State Street, where, you know, typically a good urban building actually presents a street edge and then steps back away from it so that you preserve some sky. I think that's just a bad move in general right there. I think protecting the pedestrian from the weather elements with an awning, admirable, commendable, that'd be awesome. But I think having all 7 stories of this building all the way up, sticking into the right-of-way, will be a detriment to this stretch of the world. I think that the scale of the columns is out of scale with the rest of this, which I think the material choice makes this look like, you know, an oversized utility shed on sonotube bases. I think that the State Street cutout is kind of sloppily executed. I don't think that the forms really follow any sort of conceptual backing. They just step in where there's a different program that, you know, where there are so many corners of this building that have a pretty crisp, clean line. That particular one just is this kind of jagged, you know, things don't align with other members of the facade, and the crescendo starts to build up, but it doesn't get reflected anywhere else in that facade, where I think there's a good opportunity with that that public space to even maybe start to echo some of that movement. But I think ultimately it ends up creating a giant forehead there of unadorned 10-foot tall metal panel, which I don't think is very attractive either. And this is, just another example of the logical but disappointing progression of a podium typology, where you've got one building on the bottom and you've got a different building on the top, and never the two shall meet. And where there is one gesture of tying the bottom floor into the rest of the mass, it's kind of a lipstick application, and it doesn't seem to fit into the language of that mass. So I'm going to be voting against this. I don't think there's anything that really can be done to salvage it personally. And, at the bare minimum, I would hope that the rest of you approve it with the bulk of the building set back to within the property boundaries, so that we're not negatively affecting this stretch of State Street for the rest of this building's lifespan.
Thank you, Mr. Stad. I guess question follow up on that one. I mean, one of the more prominent buildings in our downtown on a street like that is the Aspen Building. You feel like it is an uncomfortable street front?
I think the fact that there's been a pretty steady turnover of tenants down there, aside from, the realtor that tries to lease it out, and no one has ever actually leased the second floor of the Aspen Building, would speak to the fact that it really doesn't treat the pedestrian with any sort of respect.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Ms. Sucker.
I hear what you're saying about that, the Aspen Building. I think that is completely different given its location and its design. I really like that this building sort of encroaches on State, because I very much believe in the whole theory that people drive slowly when there's a built-up environment on both sides of the street. And I think that this will make State Street feel a little more urban, whereas further west, it feels a lot more like just a big through street. I think that's the urbanization of State Street is going to continue out west, and hopefully by the time people get around here, they will already have started to slow down, and this building and the other buildings along both sides will get people to drive even more slowly, which will make it feel more urban and be a lot safer for everyone.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think that, I mean, point taken. I understand, the idea that driver comfort affects driver speed, but I think that the property boundary being where it is still creates enough of a feeling of tightening of space that we don't need to tighten it any further, because what that's also going to impact is the pedestrian across the street and the building owners across the street and the occupants there. And I think that, good urbanism involves maintaining the street edge that's been set. And when you're talking about a building that occupies an entire block, you need to start looking at the next block and the block behind it as far as where the street edge has been set. And those have been set in line with the property boundaries.
Other comments from the commission? Guess I'll throw maybe a couple in there if anybody else is thinking. I think I'm kind of halfway in the middle. There's a couple of things I agree with Mr. Stad on. I had a little challenge, and some of these are looking at elevations flat on. And I do believe it's a challenge with the differential uses on podium buildings, but the disconnect of architectural language and pattern, et cetera, between the base and the upper stories, there doesn't seem to be a lot of correlation in this particular design. I was a little concerned about the metal, very large, fully metal-sided building. I think after the renderings and hearing some of the discussions and the crescendo and the different forms, I think I'm comfortable with that now, with some thoughts of further detailing on how that actually gets executed. The mural, that one's tough. I mean, obviously they're very proud of the building here. They're gonna, I think I would be comfortable maybe with a few little conditions on it, but I think the artist is going to have a lot of leeway on it. With what they're proposing now, I think they already have a vision that they've portrayed, so I'm comfortable with that. Just a couple of things, I guess, that in particular to it as window frames and the materials and the details, the PTAC unit, any kind of exterior louvers, especially within metal buildings. I think on metal siding, it can be very challenging as it can kind of disrupt the patterning on the building. Rooftop screening of any kind of equipment, whether there is going to be some or not, with a roof plan. Any other kind of louver locations. And I'm all right, I think, with the overhang piece of it, because the sidewalk is still preserved. I think it's a comfortable level up at, 20 feet. It certainly will, make the feeling of State Street is a little different, as it may start to feel a little tight, especially as development comes across the street. I'm not sure that that's all bad, but those are some of my thoughts and comments on the application. We've had others like these. I think one of the first, with some of these semi-flat but articulated elements was like with the Fowler building with the gentle curve. We had a couple of breaks and stuff in it. I still think it's successful on the front side, so I think I'm comfortable with the roof line. There are some places, depending, especially if that parapet moves up at all, especially on that. What street is that side? I guess the left side of the north elevation, you could get a lot of metal above that window between it and the parapet, which does kind of, again, lead itself to, I guess it was described as a large forehead kind of a feel. So I see your point on that as well, but I think I'd leave that up to the discretion of the architect on that massing, maybe just something to look at. So other thoughts from the commission, or anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
maybe
Mr.
just
Pohl.
one point of clarification.
Yes.
From what I heard from staff, what we're referring to as a mural is actually a paint scheme.
Sure.
And in my mind, those are two completely different things. So it's either a paint scheme that you can say, it's these colors, it's this shape, or it's an artist procured mural. And I think we should just clarify, which one is it?
Yep, I agree. I think I would lean towards paint scheme personally, just my comments on it. And I think that there's enough other detail that's we'd like to at least see if we do approve this. There's some other conditions that I think that might give the applicant some additional time to further refine and any of those at a further work session. Any other thoughts, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Redeem.
I would make a motion that we approve DRH 23-00384 as recommended in the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommended conditions of approval noted in the project report. And I will add in my motion to add condition G to bring back to a commission work session, a final design for a paint scheme within the courtyard recesses currently proposed.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
With regards to the last condition, I'd like us to consider modification to that. I think it's minor. Just more of a clarification that with regards to the paint scheme for the alcove, and that in addition to the language presented, that just specify the paint scheme shall cover all walls of the alcove.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns? I guess my intent is all the entire wall surface is covered and not, if the scheme doesn't come back and it's only 50% of the wall, very much different than what was proposed or implied in the designs we were shown tonight. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, I think that makes abundant sense, and I very much agree. That
Okay.
as long as that whole inner courtyard or both inner courtyards are fully treated with, whether we call it a paint scheme or a mural, I think we're good then.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it might make sense to just say wherever there is stucco as an exterior material, it will include the paint scheme / mural, paint scheme or mural. If we put a slash in there, it starts to muddy the water.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Simple.
and I think this is along the same vein as what this discussion is. I mean, it feels like if we put something to the effect of, bring forth a paint scheme that's in substantial conformance with the drawings presented at the design review hearing on January 10th, that's reflective of the extent of the paint scheme, as well as ties it to kind of what we would like to see, which is something similar to what we've seen today, because we like that.
Yeah. Other thoughts on what Mr.
Mr.
Simple?
Chair?
Yeah, Ms.
Yeah, I think that's a little too restrictive.
Okay.
Because if it turns out that the team hires an artist who decides to use 3 colors, it could be beautiful, but it won't be reflective of what we just saw. And I don't know how anybody else feels, but I like I think that's navy and white treatment that, I don't know who can see this, but that's depicted there. I mean, I think there are a lot of different things one can do with.
Yeah, I guess the point is we're going to see it in a work session. So I don't
So
know that
then
we need
that's
to
fine.
totally nail it down because we'll have another opportunity to make comments on it per the given motion. But at this point, do we feel like the maker of the motion want to amend the motion by any means, considering the?
Well, at this point, Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would say no for the same reason. Yeah, it's going to cover all the walls, but there's a possibility whoever the artist is or whatever their concept is, they may want to use negative space and use some of the natural colors that are there and not fill it all full of color like this is showing here. The white space may match the rest of the building. The dark space may match the rest of the building. We don't know. We just want to leave it up to them to give us a good design. So however they choose to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree. My concern and I agree and support what Commissioner Rudin is saying. I guess my intent is I just want to make sure it's on 3 walls and doesn't get narrowed down to just one or part of one wall. I just want something on 3 walls. That's the point I was trying to make there with covering all the surfaces there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
I would
Rudin.
modify my G to say bring back to a commission work session, a final design for a paint scheme covering all exposed surfaces within the courtyard recesses currently proposed. That'd do it for you.
But is there more additional that's on that south elevation too? It's not in alcove?
Oh, I don't know if they can show the previous images.
But I think there's something to be said with Mr. Simple's substantial conformance to bring back a refined presentation of the wall murals. Because around the building elevations that were on the white on the south, it looks like there's additional murals.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think it's kind of like bring back a paint scheme that provides more detail for the surfaces as presented during the hearing. You know, basically anywhere that has a paint scheme on it now we want to see a final or a more refined design in those spaces that covers those walls that showed a paint scheme on these drawings that we reviewed in the hearing.
So where did we leave off your last motion, Mr.
So-
Reading, if you don't mind?
Well, so Mr. Chairman, I think that's what I'm asking. Bring back to a commission work session a final design for a paint scheme of all surfaces within the courtyard recesses currently proposed.
But if there's some on a flat elevations that aren't on a recess?
Well, it's within that recess. So we're talking about those two major recesses. There may be more than 3 wall planes within those recesses. There might be some little jigs and jogs, but the recess is the recess.
I guess that maybe I'm confused too. On that south elevation, looks like a good portion of the exterior wall just along the alley side is also part of the mural.
Yeah,
So I guess it's beyond the recess is all I was saying. That's where kind of coming back to.
And
those
where does the
areas.
recess start and stop is what you're saying?
Well,
Does
yeah,
it start at
whole-
this
yeah,
corner?
This whole chunk of the elevation that shows mural on it as well, which is half a block on the south elevation,
mhm.
alley elevation.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I still believe we're asking them to come back with something. And if it doesn't meet our satisfaction, we'll have the opportunity to provide more input.
Okay.
They've heard everything we've had to say about it,
Yep.
and they know we're concerned about this being the slice and that piece of cake that makes this thing jump to life. Have them come back and show us what they think. They've done a nice job so far of portraying something that has gotten our interest. I believe they'll take that one step farther and we'll like it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I did have one more item that I'd like to consider to add to the conditions. And I think this would be consistent with block 68 and with the Y project. I believe we asked both of those applicants to come back at 50% documents to a work session and show us some further details, such as the exterior, the window treatments, and I believe some other items that were touched upon today. I believe the applicant said they were still working out some details and whatnot, and we'd like to probably see those back at 50%.
Just general exterior details.
Mhm.
Okay.
So would you note a condition H then?
Yes, sir.
Say it.
You want me to,
Yeah, just make up, you say what you're just saying
Okay.
there, have a 50%.
if we could add as condition H, at another work session, if the applicant can come back with the 50% set to show further details regarding the exterior and the window treatments.
Richard, fine with that?
Yep.
How about the second on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have still an updated motion with new conditions G and H. Any other discussion?
One more comment.
Yes.
I don't think that, and it might be easier for the applicant, but I don't think both items necessarily need to come back at the same time. If you need more time, for example, to determine what the paint scheme is going to be, for example. So I don't necessarily want to make it a condition that they have to come back at the same time, but we do want them both back at a work session.
Understood. I think that staff can probably note that. So we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Stad.
Just a couple of quick anecdotes. When this came before CCDC for schematic design review, I just need to point out that there was a significant amount of stifled laughter among the board, and without naming any names, one commissioner said the only way this would look any better is if the air conditioning boxes were hanging out of the windows. I think that for as much as we've talked about, elevating the design in this city and asking more of the applicants that come through here, making sure that we're using appropriate materials and being very, very careful about the detailing and the overall conceptual background of the projects that come through. I don't think this meets any of those criteria. And I think that allowing this one to move forward would be letting one past the catcher. And again, I'm going to strongly advocate against this project.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I can't go without commenting on that comment. First, as a former commissioner of CCDC, it's not CCDC's role to have any say in design, and I can just by that wording tell who I think that commissioner is, and don't think that person necessarily has good design taste. And second of all, I really do think that this is, I strongly believe that it is our role to elevate the design standards of the city and not just let anything pass. We're no longer that city that's desperate for development like we were 15 years ago, and we let anything happen. But that being said, I really think that the glazed tile on the main floor, the amount of fenestration, I like the metal siding a lot. It's a million times better than hardy board and stucco everywhere that we often see. I like the recesses. I like the overhang. I think a lot of really good care was put into details in this project, and I very much like those details. So I wholeheartedly support the approval of this building.
Okay, any last comments? With that, Christina, you please call the roll.
Semple,
Aye.
Ruding,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad,
No.
Bull,
Aye.
6 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. And that concludes our items for tonight. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.